Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's Matt Coleman, your host from Magnify World, speaking from Los Angeles. As you know, over the coming weeks, we're doing a series of interactive interviews from immersive technologists around the world. And we have today James Watson, who's the CMO for Immerse in London. How are you today?
Good, thanks, Matt. Bit wet here in England, but you know, I'm well.
Good. So you're also the co-chair of the VRAR Association for Training. Can you tell us, first of all, what that means, but, go back to, how you got into the industry first, if you don't mind, and, what inspired you to get into emerging tech?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in sort of previous to moving into the immersive tech space. So I was with sort of in the advertising and marketing sort of agency world. And as part of that, for an agency called Imagination, about 8 years ago, it's a sort of experiential technology agency, I'd say. So they do big events and they use technology. As part of that, we use a lot of VR, and it really interested me. It was actually when the first DK1, the first Oculus headset that came out, and we had one because we were always looking at new technology, and I was kind of hooked from there on in. I thought it was such a transformative technology and so exciting, even though actually back then, even though the Oculus was good, you still felt a bit sick when you came out of it, and the pixels weren't, the resolution was pretty poor. But it really kind of inspired me, and I set up a team at Imagination to look at immersive technology opportunities, primarily in VR. And from there, and it was quite funny, I would look at the opportunities that you could use virtual reality within marketing, and say, events and what have you. But I'd do a few sort of talks at conferences, and I would always end up talking about enterprise VR, how it could really make a difference to large organizations, and, training being an obvious one. And then after about 2 years of doing this, I realized I keep talking about the opportunity in enterprise VR. So why don't I actually do something about it and join an enterprise VR company? And that's what, I was lucky enough to come across Immerse, and, take up the role there as Chief Marketing Officer, and really never look back. I love every minute of it. It's great fun. I love the technology. And the market is evolving pretty rapidly as well.
Yeah, so we saw really the emergence of AR and VR in a big way, because the large corporates were investing heavily 5 years ago, and the analysts were projecting quite a large market of probably around $250 billion. But training was always, keen, and education in particular, right? And obviously we're talking about an education market now that's been completely upturned in every way, from universities, colleges, right through to school, right? So,
yeah.
What areas are you seeing, and what's the impact of VR, and what sectors of the market are you, focused on? Is it quite widely ranged, or can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting in that if you think, particularly when you think of VR training is something that goes across sectors. You have training right through from training someone how to put out a fire on an offshore oil platform, right through to training someone in insurance as to how they should handle data. So training is across every sector. But where you can apply VR to it does tend to vary, based on that sector. And so there are some sectors that are much more relevant than others, right? So if you think about the oil and gas sector, where risk is absolutely, the reduction of risk is absolutely paramount, well, you can see how putting someone into a high risk situation by putting them into a VR environment with no risk, so that when they come across, or if they were to come across that situation in their real world job, they know how to address it more safely. That has a huge impact on an organization. We work with Shell, and for Shell, it's all about taking risk out of the company. It's about, making it as safe as possible for their employees. So that is a really, really important and very obvious use case. But then equally on the other side, you can be training someone in more softer skills, so less procedural. And that might be, you know, for example, unconscious bias, whereby you can put someone into a virtual reality environment, they're sat around the table, there are people from different backgrounds, and they can see how they react. So once again, you know, that is hugely impactful. There's less, you know, it's harder to necessarily measure, although anecdotally people often feel, you know, better prepared for those situations, but it also has real relevance. But you've got quite a spectrum there from, you know, literally saving lives through to, you know, making better employees. So there are certainly sectors where it is far more at the core of what they do, and there are other sectors where it's kind of, it's more of an add-on and, you know, a good thing to be able to do, but not core to their business.
Yeah, I know, for example, Walmart in the US has, you know, invested heavily, I believe, in VR training. And, you know, when I say training, it's probably new recruits right through to new procedures. I mean, what are some of the things you're seeing in the market globally that are really working?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I can't talk about the Walmart example because that's a big competitor of ours who did that. Just kidding, obviously. I won't mention their name. What was funny about the Walmart one is where it started, and they've done quite a big program with them. And it's things like, you know, when people go onto a checkout, they do VR training to understand how they do checkout and all that sort of thing. But the first thing they did to test the water is they trained their staff on Black Friday. And basically what they did a 360 video of, so it wasn't quite VR, but, you know, there's a debate around, is 360 video VR or whatever. They basically filmed a load of people rushing towards you, then put a headset on staff in the store, and staff just saw all these people rushing towards them, and they're saying, so what would you do? How would you handle it? So it was quite a basic use of it, but actually quite funny, and probably traumatized some of the staff. So that was quite a funny start. But, you know, some of the really interesting use cases of VR that are getting some real traction. I mean, what we're finding is in the current situation that we're in, there is a much more sort of openness to new technology. And therefore people are trying, you know, VR who perhaps wouldn't have in the past would have chosen not to. But, you know, some of the really interesting use cases are, you know, anywhere ranging from, you know, some of the big pharmaceutical companies are using it within their production process. So these are all hugely controlled environments, and, you know, the cleanliness levels and all these sorts of things. So what they're doing now is they're actually not having to, you know, take up time within the facilities themselves, which are, you know, expensive to take someone into that environment and not be actually producing you know, the product, and they can take them out and they can use the VR training to do that. And there's, you know, we're working with one of the big pharma companies to do exactly that. So there are really strong use cases in that. And then, you know, in all the sort of big manufacturing scenarios. So if you have a factory, you'll have sort of 8 core safety modules within that. Things like training at heights, working in confined spaces, those sorts of things. And VR is being applied to help people train in those environments and in realistic environments. So not going through a PowerPoint presentation and, you know, pretending to, you know, be paying attention whilst you're actually on your phone, actually putting people in there. And I think where it becomes really exciting is when you think you are, through this technology, you are reducing injuries, you are reducing ultimately deaths through industrial accidents. So, you know, whilst it's not the sort of sexiest kind of, you know, use case, it's actually having direct impact on, you know, on all these different industries. And, you know, if technology can make things safer, I mean, that to me is probably, you know, the ultimate benefit you'd want to come out of it. So, you know, the use cases are really broad at the moment. I think the challenge we have with the technology is having the data to back it up. And data is a really important part of this, because something that drives me really nuts is when people go, oh yeah, anecdotally, the feedback was that person feels they can do their job better and they think they are better positioned to be more effective, which quite frankly is rubbish. because of course they're going to say that. They've just tried on a really cool piece of technology. They've just had an experience they probably never had. And of course they're going to say it's great for their job, but what does that do for the industry? It's like, well, how do you take that to your, your CFO and get funding for that? Oh yeah, the guys on the factory floor really loved it. Yeah, because, they're going to love new technology. But if you don't have the data to back it up, it doesn't really go anywhere. And the industry is getting there now. Our platform in particular provides, 30 data points per user per second. There's tons of data. The challenge is now getting it out into the market and to have, people happy to talk about the data that's coming out of it. Because once you get a sense of, well, we reduced errors by 50%, which resulted in a 10% increase in profit margin, it suddenly becomes a no-brainer. The challenge is just where a lot of the customers and projects are at, they're just in that collation of data phase. But I'd say in a year's time, there'll be absolutely a flood of data on the market, which will make more and more enterprises kind of go, well, we have to have, we have to use this technology for the business.
And what are some of those 30 data points per second, I think you said?
Per second per user.
Yeah. So tell us, what are you monitoring there? What's some of the important ones?
I mean, so what you can do is if you have a virtual environment and you have a procedure that someone has to go through and they have to check off 8 certain actions, everything is being tracked within that. So all those 8 actions are being tracked. And when they've done them, if they've done them correctly, so if you have to pick something up but you drop it because you're doing something, you're not paying attention or whatever, that's tracked. If the time it takes for you to go through a certain action, that's tracked. Because it is this virtual environment, which is in effect, got every data point within there can be measured. You almost have too much data. You need to kind of define what is actually of value. And then from that, you can work out, okay, the person who took 3 minutes versus the person who took 2 minutes, actually, over the course of 6 months, that person who took 3 minutes retained the information better than the person who did it in 2 minutes. So doing it quicker isn't good. We need to slow people down. So you then get those kind of learnings and go, okay, well, we thought quicker was better. Quicker isn't better because they're forgetting it. So let's slow the thing down. So when you get to that point and you can kind of take all those data points and turn them into a meaningful output, that is when it becomes a really genuine sort of business transformative kind of option.
So what about collaboration? VR is, very good for collaboration, and you've got all these chat rooms, that are now becoming more and more popular because they're holding virtual conferences and virtual concerts. And Jean-Michel Jarre did one recently out of Paris. And he had, there was 600,000 people that saw the web online version, but I know there was about 10,000 people in VR, which is a lot. Talking about collaboration in business or anywhere. I mean, how are you finding that in regards to training and education?
So I think that whole collaboration piece, there are some really valid use cases within it. I think there are some others that I find a bit gimmicky. I think I can totally get why you'd want to go and see Jean-Michel Jarre and sort of be able to sort of put yourself in a virtual environment and he's up on stage, because that's just kind of cool and fun and cutting edge. But I do find a lot of conferences that have gone, full on VR. I don't think that's a good way to do those conferences. I think you're far better off doing like a Jump In, which is like this collaboration platform where you have video, whatever. I think the people who are doing the VR conferences are kind of the ones who've really drunk the Kool-Aid, and they're a bit too close to the technology and they've all got their headsets and they think it's really super cool. But actually you go into these things and you're very odd looking avatars. It's all a bit awkward. Is it something that'd be better done just over, a video platform? I think so. So I'm a bit skeptical of that. I understand why people are doing it, but I don't think it's the best use. But coming back to your other point of, if you want to collaborate, if you want to sort of sit in a room and brainstorm, VR isn't the technology for you, because you are far better off at the moment still doing that as a video call, or of course in person, but we can't do that. So I do think, I mean, I know Spatial are doing some interesting things. I don't know if you've seen their platform, but that's pretty cool, because it's kind of taking scans of people. And so that's getting a bit more meaningful, but it does tend to be, from what I've seen, you know, get in a room, look at people who look quite like their real self, and then do a load of sort of post-its and stuff. And it's still, I don't think, has a ton of value. I think where VR has real collaboration value is if you want to get into a virtual environment with 3 or 4 people and look at, say, a product, right? So maybe you've got a new turbine to go in a jet engine, and you've got an engineer in Singapore, you've got a project leader in St. Petersburg, and you've got someone else in the US and someone in the UK, and you want to bring them together, and you want to look at this model that you've imported into VR and maybe take it apart and look at how the thing's been constructed and say, well, have you considered this? I think when there's something like almost an object that you bring into VR that you then collaborate on, that's where it's got value. But when it's just kind of human beings in a room listening to people, you know, unless it's Jean-Michel Jarre, of course, which, you know, I'd go into VR to listen to him any day. Yeah, I think some of it is just a little bit on the gimmick side still. You know, it needs to have more value.
Yeah, there are some limitations on how many people you can have in a VR room anyway, right? I think that's around, you know, 100, 150 before you need to multiply out the rooms.
Yeah.
You can obviously get, you know, more and more people in there. You probably haven't had a need for that though, have you? Or what?
No, not really. I mean, I think the most people we have on our platform at any one time in, you know, a training experience is, I think, up to 20. It's quite interesting because when we first started sort of, you know, going out with messaging around our platform, we thought multiplayer was a really, really important thing. And it's a really important feature. And indeed, we built our own multiplayer functionality. But actually, a lot of training is singular. So whilst we thought this was amazing technology and everyone would want to have, you know, 5 or 6 people in there at the same time, a lot of training is singular. It's someone going in, doing something, doing some things, and then seeing how they get on. So actually, from a training perspective, multi-user, it's not the killer functionality. It's good functionality because you can have the trainer in there as well who's working with the trainee. So that's pretty impactful. But yeah, the actual sort of need from a training perspective to have loads of people in there is not the norm.
Yeah. And have you seen a big increase from enterprise and corporates, particularly now that COVID's hit and it's been around for so long? Who knows when I know that the UK is going back into lockdown. Is that right?
We're going back down into, I mean, there's stronger measures in place. It's not full lockdown, but it's probably, you know, 50% of the way there. But so the impact we've seen from it is, I think it's quite varied, if I'm honest. There are some of the bigger organizations who are fast tracking their use of emerging technology or immersive technology. So there are companies who have, you know, I know one company, a big FMCG organization who greenlighted an augmented reality project that had literally been on hold for 3 years, you know, and it got greenlighted in like days because it was a remote assist type thing that you know, it'd been a struggle to build the business case for or get buy-in, and it was like that AR remote assist thing that we haven't done, just do it and do it now. So I think there are some organizations who are really going faster to implement these kind of immersive tech solutions. But I think on the flip side, you know, as is ever the case when there is such a global economic slowdown, there are also some organizations who have said, look, we just need to keep the lights on at the moment and we need to focus on our core business. We can't be launching a new, you know, a new technology platform or a new solution now because, quite frankly, we're not quite sure if we're going to get through this without making severe job cuts. And there's always that danger, isn't there, of when sort of, you know, economic downturns hit, do you do you actually go more aggressive and really embrace new ways of working to sort of put yourself in a better position for the future? Or do you contract back into yourself and kind of, lick your wounds until things improve? And so what I think we're seeing is a combo of the two. And I think they're pretty much coming out even. So I would kind of say for every organization that's perhaps put something on hold, there's another organization that is fast tracking something because, they see this is the right time to do it. So I would say the overall effect from it, within some parts of immersive tech, the sort of whole lockdown has clearly accelerated some. I think particularly in this, as I said, the augmented reality of being able to sort of, trainers or maintenance staff be able to remotely fix things, that has gone off the scale. There's some companies there who are absolutely flying with those solutions, and you can completely see why. But there are other ones that have definitely sort of, gone by the wayside. And I think what we do see though is, and what I really hope comes out of this, because there aren't many positives to come out of what's going on, is I do believe that businesses will have a different attitude to implementing new technology in the longer term. And when I say longer term, I don't mean long term, but once things have settled out somewhat, there's a vaccine, things become a bit more stable. So 8 to 12 months, I think a lot of those companies, even the ones that have kind of really sort of contracted in, they will have tried new technology through necessity. I call it like a mass enforced experiment. They will have tried technology. I spoke to someone from one of the big consultancy firms, and his role is sort of to evangelize, particularly VR within the organization. And he said he had never had the opportunity to get as many senior partners trying VR than he'd never had that opportunity because of the lockdown. Because they're all going, well, I better try this thing because, clearly it's an important technology. So, that consultancy will come out with a much greater buy-in to the use of particularly VR. So, what I do hope is, as we come out of it, there is an openness to technology. And it doesn't have to be VR. I'm not just saying, everyone's going to go and use VR, but just being more open to new technological solutions to solve some of the sort of the standard problems businesses have. And if that does happen, which I fervently hope it does, then that could be quite a mindset shift within the enterprise sector to come out of, what is, let's face it, an appalling situation.
Yeah, look, I think from, my research over the last sort of 6 months is that this could fast forward people's plans in innovation by 3 to 5 years. Some people are stressing 5 years, which seems to be a long way away. But, we've got these interesting announcements. Facebook just announced, the last few days about their new smart glasses, how much progress they've made with that. They're looking at, all this new hand gesture technology, and, how you can see, digital things in the real world, of course, which is what it's all about. Both enterprise and consumer focus. And you've got Apple, announcing their, who knows when announcement for their smart glasses, but that could be in the next year or two, I guess, as well. How will training and education be impacted? I would have thought having my glasses being, smart would be incredible. I'd be using them yesterday if they were available in this size. I know there are some on the market, but what are your thoughts on smart glasses and getting out of that enclosed atmosphere?
Yeah, and I think that announcement for Facebook, especially the fact that it's with Ray-Ban, who are actually, Ray-Ban are owned by that Italian company that own basically every single sunglass brand. Luxoccita, I can't remember, it's a weird name, but there's this Italian company who pretty much owns every sunglasses brand, which I found quite incredible. It's an interesting announcement, absolutely. And I think, when you've got, the guns of Facebook and Apple really pointed towards this technology, ultimately, A, there's a market there, B, people are, have an appetite for it, and C, that, there'll be something pretty spectacular come out in due course. I think the smart glasses, the Ray-Ban thing is actually going to be quite low level sort of integration. I'm not quite sure I think they're just going to have a very basic functionality. But yeah, I mean, I think the challenge with these, much as with VR, AR glasses, whatever, you know, it's barriers to entry, and the barriers to entry is going to be cost initially. You know, that's something that has stalled the sort of consumer uptake of VR with the cost of headsets. And, you know, having said that, Facebook, you know, the new Oculus Quest 2 is only, I think, $299, which, you know, is starting to get into interesting territory there. I mean, that's competing with the PlayStation VR on the price level. And so suddenly you're going to get a whole different group of people going, oh, maybe I will pick one of those up at Christmas. And then once it gets more out, you know, there's greater you know, numbers out into the consumer market. That then also impacts on the enterprise market. So I think, and the AR glasses thing, or smart glasses, you know, there's got to be such a compelling use case for them. Like you said, you'd use them, and I totally get that. But, you know, you'd have to be like, I'm going to use them because it's got this specific benefit. I mean, it's That's really right. going to, you know, and it's not, and I still get to choose a pair that I like and look how I want them to look. And, you know, and is it going to enhance my life as opposed to just sort of jam another technological layer into your life that you probably don't, you know, necessarily know what you need. So I think, as ever with this technology, it's, you know, it will only ever take off when there is that really core sort of reason to use, and it helps you in your everyday life, you know. And you know, that's not to say those use cases aren't out there, but, you know, what is, you know, I hate the term killer app because I think it's misused and overused, but what is the killer use of that technology that's going to tip it suddenly into a kind of more a more mainstream environment?
Yeah, look, just drawing this to a close, James, what are some final words on, you know, marketing and VR? I know we were going to touch that earlier on. Can you share some thoughts on, you know, the business of marketing this new emerging technologies to corporate or consumer?
Yeah, I mean, so I came across a really interesting term, actually, from a book I'm reading called Crossing the Chasm, which is a great book about sort of innovative technology and how you market it. And the term I really liked was discontinuous innovation. So discontinuous innovation is when consumers or business have no reference point to sort of really benchmark or contextualize that technology. And VR is absolutely in that place. You're not replacing something, you're not upgrading something. This is new technology. And the way they formed it was sort of, if you think about, you know, you wear glasses, Matt, so you might go and buy a new pair of glasses because they're lighter frames or there's something good about them. That's a sort of a continuous innovation. Or you might actually try contact lenses. And once again, that's a continuous innovation because you kind of get it. It's like, well, instead of the glasses in a frame, they're on your eyes. Okay, I get it. Where discontinuous innovation comes in is like laser eye surgery. Then you're just like, oof, hang on, you're going to laser my lenses. That's just like, I don't know I don't know where to position that. It just sounds really scary. And that's discontinuous innovation. So to market something that is in this discontinuous innovation space is really hard, because be it a consumer or a business, they're not, how do they know what they should be getting? How do they know what they should consider? How do they know, you know, that this thing isn't going to disappear in a few months because it's kind of this new funky technology? So the way to get over that is, and we're very lucky with the customers we work with, is to say, hey, look who's doing it. You know, Shell are doing this, DHL are doing this, GE Healthcare are doing this. And that gives that sense of, oh, okay, well, if those guys are doing it, you know, I'm not going to catch a cold by embracing this technology. So, you know, you have to work much harder when it is technology in this area that doesn't really have those kind of core anchors to reference to.
Fantastic. And James, can you give yourself a shout out on where people can find you on LinkedIn, or, you know,
Yeah, sure. You can get hold of me on Twitter. It's James C. Watson. Just chuck a C in the middle there. And also same on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and yeah, I'm always happy to offer an opinion.
Fantastic, James. Look, really pleasure to talk to you today, and really interesting insights. Amazing work that Immerse is doing in the training space. So congratulations on that. And it was lovely to talk to you again today.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Likewise.
Bye-bye.